I still remember the day my mother called me the most useless child. It wasn't just an insult, it was a verdict, a sentence, a declaration that no matter what I did, I would never be enough. I was 16, sprawled across the faded carpet in our small living room, trying to focus on my homework while the rain hammered the windows. But her voice cut through the sound of the storm like jagged glass. "You'll never amount to anything," she said, her tone sharper than I thought a mother's could be. "You're just useless." The word stuck to me like a second skin. I felt it seep into my bones, filling every corner of my mind. I had always been a quiet child, the one who stumbled through chores, who tripped over my own feet, who couldn't hold a conversation without mumbling. But I tried, I always tried, and yet, she made it clear that trying was not enough. I wanted to disappear. I wanted the walls to swallow me whole, but instead, I sat there, trembling, pretending to read, pretending not to hear. My younger brother laughed at something on TV, oblivious to the storm inside me, and I wondered if he would ever hear the same words. I envied him for his innocence. That night in the small sanctuary of my room, I replayed every memory I had with her, the cold silences, the sighs of disappointment, the constant comparisons to my peers. My friends who got praised for small achievements, my classmates who brought home medals or letters of commendation. Why couldn't I be enough? The more I thought, the more I realized that it wasn't just me. She had a way of undermining anyone she deemed inferior. And yet, there was something else. Something I couldn't put my finger on. It started small, almost imperceptible. I noticed bills hidden in drawers, envelopes tucked behind books, receipts my mother hastily shoved into her purse. At first, I thought it was normal everyone had secrets, right? But the more I looked, the more patterns emerged. Payments made that no one else knew about, money withdrawn and hidden. There was a rhythm to it, a pattern that made no sense to a family barely getting by. I was terrified, but I was also intrigued. How could someone who told me I was worthless be living this way? How could she call me useless when she herself was hiding things from everyone? A spark of something I hadn't felt in a long time flickered inside me. Curiosity, determination, the tiniest whisper of rebellion. I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, my mind racing. The insult that had once shattered me now began to morph into fuel. Maybe I was useless, in her eyes, but I wasn't blind. Maybe I couldn't cook or clean perfectly. Maybe I stumbled over words. Maybe I failed tests. But I could see what she was hiding. And if I could see it, maybe I could do something about it. By the time dawn broke, painting my room in pale gold, a plan had started to form. Not a plan born of anger, or cruelty, or revenge in the traditional sense, but a plan that would prove my worth in a way she could never ignore. A plan that would show everyone the truth she had spent years burying. For the first time in years, I didn't feel useless. I felt awake. After that morning, everything felt different. I no longer walked through the house like a ghost, silently absorbing her insults. Instead, I started watching, listening, and noticing details I had ignored for years. My mother moved through the rooms with a practiced ease, hiding things in drawers, pockets, and locked cabinets. At first, I thought it was just paranoia. I had always been a little obsessive, but then I saw it. A small envelope, barely peeking out from under a stack of unpaid bills. It was my first real clue. I waited until she was busy with the garden, and I slipped into the room while my brother was at school. Hands trembling, I pulled the envelope free. Inside were receipts, statements, and payment slips. Months of money she had been moving around secretly. Some were transfers I didn't recognize. Others were large sums paid into accounts I had never heard of. The more I read, the more my stomach churned. She had been hiding money from everyone. For a moment, disbelief froze me. Was it possible that the woman who called me useless had been deceiving the entire family? That she had wealth she had never shared, even when we were struggling? The unfairness of it hit me like a physical blow. I could almost hear her voice, sharp and dismissive, echoing in my mind. "You'll never amount to anything." But beneath the shock, another feeling emerged, clarity. I wasn't useless. I could see patterns, I could connect dots, and I could understand what she had tried so desperately to hide. This knowledge was power, and I realized I had been underestimated all my life. The insult that had haunted me for years now fueled a new determination. Over the next few weeks, I began documenting everything meticulously. I made copies of statements, photographed receipts, noted dates, amounts, and bank details. Every night, after pretending to study or sleep, I would pore over my notes, piecing together the full picture. My mother never suspected a thing. She continued her usual routine, confident that no one would uncover her secrets. The more I discovered, the angrier I became, but it was a quiet, controlled anger, not a blind fury, but the sharp, calculating kind that comes from knowing the truth while others live in ignorance. I realized that she had always tried to maintain control over us through fear and belittlement. Calling me useless was part of that control. But now, I held the upper hand, and yet I didn't want to act rashly. This wasn't about revenge in the conventional sense, smashing her reputation in anger or yelling in the middle of the living room. That would make me no better than her. No, this had to be deliberate, thoughtful, and undeniable. I wanted the revelation to speak louder than any words I could ever say. I started imagining scenarios in my mind, planning the perfect moment. I pictured the look on her face when the family discovered the truth, the subtle shock, the unspoken realization that she had been caught. And I imagined the quiet satisfaction of proving my worth, not through physical acts or loud declarations, but through intelligence, patience, and precision. For the first time in my life, I felt in control. I wasn't a useless child. I wasn't the one defined by someone else's cruelty. I was someone who could see the world clearly, someone who could gather the facts, and someone who could use them to rewrite the story of my life. As I lay in bed at night, clutching my notebook full of evidence, I whispered a silent promise to myself. One day, everyone would see the truth. And when that day came, the world would know exactly who was truly useless, and who was capable of brilliance beyond anyone's imagination. The day I decided to act, I felt a strange mixture of nerves and exhilaration. For weeks, I had waited, watched, and planned. Every detail of my mother's hidden transactions was meticulously documented. I wasn't rushing into this. I wanted it to be perfect, undeniable, and quietly humiliating. Her deception would be exposed not with yelling, but with truth that spoke for itself. I invited a few close family friends over, casually suggesting a family financial discussion, under the guise of wanting their advice on budgeting. My mother, unsuspecting, laughed and agreed. She had no idea that the very thing she had hidden would be the centerpiece of this conversation. I could feel the irony taste sweet in my mouth. As everyone settled in, I began the conversation with a casual tone, as if I were asking for guidance rather than preparing to strike. I pulled out my notebook, carefully organized, each page a record of her secret payments. "I've been looking at our finances," I said softly, "and I found some things I don't understand. I thought maybe we could figure them out together." She looked up, puzzled but amused. "What things?" she asked, smirking. I could almost hear her thinking I was naive. Still, the useless child she loved to insult. That smirk would vanish soon enough. I opened the notebook and started showing the documents payments she had hidden, accounts no one else knew about, transactions that painted a very different picture of our family's finances than she had ever let anyone see. The room fell silent. My mother's face went pale, then red, then white with disbelief. I continued calmly, letting the evidence speak louder than any accusation I could make. "Do you see?" I asked, my voice steady. "All this money was never discussed with anyone. It was hidden while we struggled. I thought maybe you could explain why." Her lips trembled. I don't know what you mean," she stammered. I shook my head slowly, letting the tension build. "I think everyone can see exactly what it means." I looked around at the family friends, at my younger brother, at the quiet expressions of shock and disbelief. The weight of truth settled over the room like a heavy blanket. No one needed me to say it aloud. The documents, the dates, the amounts, they were undeniable. She tried to interrupt, tried to offer excuses, but the room no longer belonged to her. For the first time, she realized that control had slipped from her grasp. Her authority, built on insults and manipulation, was meaningless in the face of evidence, And I had orchestrated it quietly, calmly, and flawlessly. I felt a strange sense of vindication, but not the bitter, destructive kind. I didn't shout, I didn't cry, I didn't throw anything. I simply let the truth shine in a way she could never deny, and in that silence, I felt a power I had never known before, the power of being seen, of being respected, and of being right. When the room finally recovered, my mother's voice was small, almost a whisper. I didn't mean for you to find out. I know, I said softly, closing my notebook. But now you know that I'm not useless. I see things, I understand things, I can act when others can't, and I always will. For the first time, I looked at her not with fear or longing for approval, but with clarity. I was no longer the child she had tried to diminish. I was someone who could stand tall, who could uncover truths, and who could command respect not through wealth or charm, but through intelligence, patience, and integrity. That evening, as the guests left and the house grew quiet, I felt a peace I had never known. I had shown the world the truth. And in doing so, I had finally shown myself that I was capable, brilliant, and above all, worthy. The days after the reveal were quieter than I expected. My mother retreated into herself, avoiding eye contact, mumbling excuses, and sometimes speaking in a voice so low it was almost a whisper. The house felt heavy with tension, but I noticed something new too, a subtle shift in the way the rest of the family looked at me. There was respect in their eyes, a recognition I had never received before. It wasn't loud praise or over-the-top congratulations, but a quiet acknowledgement that I had been right, that I had proven myself in a way words alone never could. At first, I didn't know how to feel about my mother. Anger, satisfaction, relief, perhaps a little of everything. But over time, I realized that my victory didn't have to include hatred. I didn't need to relish her shame. I didn't need to rub her mistakes in her face. The act of uncovering the truth, of standing tall in the face of belittlement, was enough. The validation came not from humiliating her, but from finally knowing my own worth. I started to spend more time with my younger brother. He had always looked up to me in small ways, but now he seemed to notice me differently. I helped him with homework, taught him to be observant, and encouraged him to trust his own instincts. I could see his eyes light up when he realized that being clever and patient could be just as powerful as being loud or confident. In guiding him, I began to feel a sense of purpose I had never felt before. My mother, meanwhile, remained distant, but over the weeks, small changes began to emerge. She stopped insulting me outright. Occasionally, she even asked my advice on minor matters, tentatively, as if testing whether my intelligence was real. I responded cautiously, never gloating, always measured. I wasn't ready to forgive fully, but I was learning that power and respect could coexist with restraint. I was no longer defined by her words or her approval. For myself, the greatest change was internal. I no longer questioned my abilities, my judgment, or my worth. I had faced the sharpest edge of betrayal and emerged stronger, wiser, and more self-assured. The label she had slapped on me, useless, no longer held any weight. I realized that our parents' opinions, however influential in childhood, were not the final measure of who we could become. I had written my own definition of value, and it was far richer than anything she could have imagined. Over time, the household began to settle into a new rhythm. Financial transparency became the norm, not because my mother volunteered it, but because I insisted on it quietly, firmly. Friends and extended family noticed the change too. They respected me not only for the way I handled the revelation, but for the way I carried myself afterward, calm, dignified, and unshakably confident. And me, I began to dream bigger. I planned for my future with clarity and courage. I knew that life would throw challenges at me, but I had survived the sharpest of emotional storms. I had learned to see, to understand, and to act. I had learned that self-worth is not given, it is earned, and sometimes it must be defended with courage and intelligence. One quiet evening, as I watched the sunset through my bedroom window, I felt a sense of peace I had never known. The pain of those childhood words still lingered faintly, but it no longer controlled me. I had turned my mother's betrayal into my own awakening. I had turned her words into fuel, her deceit into a lesson, and her control into freedom. I smiled, thinking of the journey I had endured. I was no longer the useless child. I was someone capable, resilient, and unstoppable, and for the first time in my life, I knew it, and so did the world.